Hey gang, Kirk Faulkner with the Knowledge Coop and the co-host of Lessons from Last Time with Ken Perry. Ken's not here with me right now, but we wanted to do an introduction to the podcast you're going to see over the next 2 weeks. We're going to release it in a two-part series, but it's our interview with Matthew Cox, and it is fascinating. Matthew is kind of notorious. He was a highly sought after criminal who did a lot of crazy stuff, and it pretty much all comes out in this podcast interview. So view this as a disclaimer or at least a warning that there's some colorful language in this interview, but there's also some colorful content. Matthew doesn't really pull any punches about what he did and why he did it. And it's interesting for a lot of reasons, but we think you'll find it fascinating. We think you'll learn something from it, but we want you all to be aware and choose to watch it if you want to over these next 2 weeks. Unlike our normal release episode, we're not going to do this one every other week. We're going to do it this week and next. But as you view this, know that there is some language and there are some ideas that are expressed sometimes without remorse, and you might find that it's a little bit difficult to watch. There's your warning. Learn from it if you can. Choose not to watch it if you choose to. And as always, we're grateful for your viewership here at the Knowledge Coop and at Lessons from Last Time.
This is going to be a very, very interesting episode of Lessons from Last Time. It is so rare that we get a guest that I have actually Googled multiple times over many years to learn about. Like, you've been fascinating to me. So first of all, Matthew Cox, thanks for coming on and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's fascinating in all the wrong reasons.
I know, man. It is. I typed in Matthew Cox into Google so many times back in the day when when all the stuff went down, before you ended up, in prison. I had already been looking you up. I wonder if I could find him. Like, you were on the run. But let's go back and start at the beginning, because you're fascinating to me, and your life has been very interesting to me. If you listen to the podcast at all, you'll find that I have ADHD. My handle on Instagram is ADHD CEO. So when I see somebody chasing a rush and finding that thing, I get really hooked on, that's so interesting that somebody needed that, needed to grab that, that rush. So let's start at the very beginning. You are from originally
Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida, and you got into the mortgage industry.
Yes.
And you were brand new. You had no training, like all of us. How did you find the industry?
I was dating a very attractive girl. We were actually engaged. We'd been dating about 3-4 years, and she was actually working as a stripper and it sounds like a cliche, to strip her way through college, which she did. She got a degree in finance, super smart girl, and we lived together. And she happened to meet a couple of executives that ran a mortgage, well, a lender. And one of them said, "You'd be great at this." And as ridiculous as that is, sounds, you don't meet a stripper and say, "You should be a loan officer."
Yeah, of course.
But she was, and so he ended up hiring her, and she said, "Look, you got to talk to my boyfriend. He graduated college. He's, whatever. I'd had a bunch of just failed jobs. Like, I just wasn't doing well at any of them." And she said, "You'd be great at this." And so I met with the whatever vice president, I forget. He basically was the owner. Met with him. He flew me in, and they trained me for like 3 days in Greensboro. I want to say North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm not sure where Greensboro is. One of the Carolinas.
North Carolina.
North Carolina,
Yeah.
yeah. So I went there. I trained for like three, maybe 4 days. They flew me back. I started, and They put me in an office, and I started working.
So I actually think that comes directly from The Big Short, the stripper scene in The Big
Yeah.
Short.
I always joke whenever people talk to me about the company. I'm like, I always say, "Did you see The Big Short?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You remember the knuckleheads that he goes down and talks to?" And they're like, like I focus on like strippers, bro. Like, or I focus on like people that are here illegally, or they don't care. I had 12 of those guys. Those were my mortgage
Oh
brokers.
my
I mean,
gosh.
they should not have been mortgage brokers. They had no real understanding of financing. They could, however, fill out an application, structure a deal, and then, of course, I would make sure the deal went through if necessary.
So fascinating. And we're going to go down so many roads, I hope, as we continue this conversation. But I want to take a step back without rabbit trailing too far. What were you like as a kid? What did you do for fun? Were you into sports? Were you into debate? What did you do growing up? What was your
So I failed I want to say it was like the first or second grade. I used to say like I failed the first grade, but I remember I said that to my mom one time. She was like, "You failed the second grade." I was like, "I did?" I don't remember. Anyway, I had failed. I wasn't doing well. They had me tested by the local whatever, whoever tests you when you're in, in a early school for the public schools. So they had me tested, and they said, okay, well, he's extremely smart, right? Like one of the tests I scaled, like at genius level IQ. He's articulate. He has a great vocabulary. He's intelligent, but he has a learning disability, and he's absolutely failing across the board on nearly uh, all areas. And so they put me in a special school for a little bit. Uh, I actually ended up with kids that had like Tay-Sachs disease and Down syndrome and stuff because
Hmm.
the actual special classes for kids with learning disabilities was full. So they put me in that class, which I did not like, and I ran away from school several times. And eventually, my parents had to put me in into a special, needs school, I guess you call it. And that's where I stayed until I graduated. I went to a few of them, but I eventually graduated high school in a school that, they just were trying to get you to learn how to read and write. I probably, to this day, probably read and write at a fourth or fifth grade level. The great thing is with computers, and talk to text, like you would never know it.
Hmm.
But if you handed me something and said, "Hey, Matt, read this page," it would very quickly you would be like, "Oh wow, this is super choppy. Like
Wow.
this is not smooth." And keep in mind too, I've written 7 books. I've gotten 2 publishing deals. Like my books were in Barnes and Nobles.
Hmm.
I've optioned multiple stories that I've written, and yet I read at about a fourth or fifth grade level. So yeah,
Wow.
but no, there was no debate. There was basically, can we just get this kid to function and graduate high school? So I barely graduated high school. I was on the soccer team for a few years. My father was an alcoholic. He would show up and scream at me and yell and be drunk. And so I eventually asked my mom if I could stop doing that, and was 14 or 15. She said, "If you don't want to, that's fine." But yeah, my father was, made a bunch of money. He made a bunch of money. He was super smart, very charismatic. He was a natural salesman, but I was not the son that I think he felt he deserved. You know,
Mm.
and he wasn't, if he got drunk, he wasn't shy at letting you know you were a
Yeah.
loser, and
Wow.
you were never going to be anything, and you'll be lucky to, you know. So anyway, eventually I tell you the one thing I did figure out when I was growing up is that what I definitely learned from my dad was, if you make a bunch of money, you can basically behave however you want. You can treat people horribly, and they will cater to you. He worked for State Farm Insurance. He was always in like the top 10, top 20 agencies in the nation. He always won the trips, always won the bonuses. Everybody loved him. But then he'd go on a 2 or 3 week drunken bender. State Farm would swoop in, they'd sober him up, they'd put him in a rehab for 30 days, and but he'd be great for another year and a half, 2 years. He'd do it again, they'd swoop him up, pick him up, dry him out for 3 months. Listen, one time the whole family had to go.
Oh, wow.
Like
Oh,
we didn't
wow.
go, we weren't in the clinic, but we're going 2 or 3 times a week to classes. And I remember to like Al-Anon classes. And I remember thinking like, I'm not an alcoholic.
Hmm.
What are we doing? I'm like 15, 16 years old. It's like, why are we here? But yeah, he was he would do that, and they would clean him up, and my mother catered to him, and everybody catered to him. And so I think I've always remember thinking, you can pretty much, if you make a lot of money, you can get away with pretty much anything, which was
Wow.
not the lesson that I should have been learning as a
Right.
kid, obviously.
Well, no, but it's interesting. I mean, you're in school, you're put in these separate classes, so you're told by the school system that you don't really fit in this group.
Right.
You watch your dad go through what he's going through. You start kind of watching. It's not great for you. You're having this experience, but then you're looking at it going, I guess I just make money. I mean, I guess if that's what I do, then
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Like it was definitely wanted to make a bunch of money. Like it was, but of course, once I graduated college, I got a degree in fine arts,
you
right?
got
Like,
through college.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, listen, not just that. I mean, sure, we're talking about like A's and B's. I did
Wow.
amazing in college, but keep in mind what my classes are. We're talking about painting, drawing. These are not
Mm.
your guys laughing. I mean, these are not. Now, I tried to get a degree. I started to get a degree in like in business or finance, but I mean, the only C I ever got in all of college was, I think it was accounting two. I got a C. And I was like, look, if I can't get, I'm never getting through micro and macroeconomics. Like I'm
Mhm.
never getting through these classes. So it was like, okay, switch majors. And, so I ended up getting I switched to fine arts, and I got a degree in fine arts, and everything got very easy.
Fascinating,
Yeah,
though, because
really.
this kid who was in special education and elementary school and maybe middle school has the chutzpah to go to college, regardless of what the degree program was. That's still a pretty big accomplishment for a
Mhm.
kid who was forced into different academic courses along the way as a young person.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just didn't know what else I was going to do.
Yeah,
I didn't know any other way. The only people I knew that were making money, I grew up upper middle class,
right.
right? We're driving a BMW, got nice clothes. You play soccer. Uh, but everybody I know, they're doctors, lawyers, the community that I grew up in, they're they're CPAs, they're doctors, they're um, insurance agents. These are the people that are making money. Like you need a degree, and my
Mhm.
father definitely let me know you need a degree, or you're gonna be laying drywall. And although now laying drywall is a
Not
lot of
such a
money,
bad gig,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but back then that just seemed like an insult that was thrust at me by my father. So I thought, okay, you got to get a degree, and so yeah, that was a degree I could get.
And before the mortgage industry, you had mentioned you were falling out of jobs. Nothing was
Yeah, I
really.
tried to. So I ended up getting, I wanted to go into insurance just like my dad.
Mhm.
And I actually was hired by several companies. Well, first, what I did was the last semester of school, I went and I got my insurance license, right? So in Florida, it's broken up into two licenses, but the major license it's called a 220 license. So I got that license. And so it allowed you to become an insurance agent. You could sell insurance, but you could also be an insurance adjuster. Well, I went to several companies and applied, and they all wanted to hire me. The problem was there was an aptitude test it's done by, I think, Accord, which makes anyway, they make all of the applications and all the paperwork. It's the
Mhm.
Accord, kind of like Fannie Mae makes all the 1003,
Yeah.
the VODs, right? So I took this thing. One of them they also had was an aptitude test, which I took the aptitude test and I failed it. Now it's not a pass or fail, but I failed. They say, oh, it's not a pass or fail, it's an aptitude test. So
Right.
you didn't fail, you just can't work for us.
Mhm.
So what I eventually did was I just became an insurance adjuster, you know, and hoping at some point I'll become an agent. Well, I couldn't keep up with the workload, right? Like it's not clicking boxes. It's writing reports, it's filling out. So
Mhm.
I'm talking to people on the phone, they're telling me what happened. I'm trying to write out. This is back before Word, right? Like so I'm not writing something. These are specialized systems, so they're not checking your English. So I've got a little spell checker. I'm trying to check, I can't keep up with the workload. I'm working
Mhm.
60 hours a week. Everybody else is done in 40. I'm working 60. I'm still behind. I never got fired, but I got laid off when they had a group of people get laid off. I always managed to be in that group.
Mhm.
Like, that happened a couple times. So I did that for a year and a half. Then I started working with a buddy of mine doing construction, which I hated. And so we're laying tile, we're putting in French doors and windows, and it's horrible. And at that same time, my girlfriend comes to me and says, "Listen, you got to be a mortgage broker.
Mhm.
You would be great at this." Like she was always like, "You, what are you doing? You can do this. You can do." Well, I've tried to do the business thing. It's not working. And so she came in and said, "Look, you got to do this. You can do this." And so I did, and everything was automated. You punch in your client's name, and it populates everything. You
Mhm.
punch in their address, it populates, and your client's right there. How do you spell this? How do you spell that? No problem. It does everything. It's a couple percentages, and it automatically does everything for you. How much is the house? Oh, 250,000. Oh, you're putting out 5%. Like, this is great. This is perfect for me. So all I have to do is be charismatic and personable, and it's just
Mhm.
put together deals and structure them, and that's easy. I can do that. So yeah, so that's how I ended up working at Eagle Lending, which is the name of that company. I worked there and started committing fraud.
So how
Yeah.
long were you a good guy?
I wasn't. There was
Because
never
my
a good guy period. Everybody's like, "So you're going 6 months, or what, 6 months a year, and you got into a jam?" No, no. My first loan was a jam. My first loan was a woman. I'm not going to say her name. I probably have said her name. I'm actually friends with her on Facebook to this
Oh
day.
my
We've actually
gosh.
gone out since I came back from prison. We've gone out and hung, not dated, but hung out, right? And it's so funny too because the fraudulent loan that she got, she ended up selling that house a few years later and made like 100 and something thousand dollars. So, a lot of times people will think, oh, it's a fraudulent loan. It went under. No, no. Like 95% of fraudulent loans
Perform.
perform.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, anyway, what happened was she had been 30 days late on her rent. And so I got the verification of deposit, verification of employment, I got everything, right? The VOR, everything. I put it all together in the file. I got her W-2s, pay stubs. She's she's perfect. Got her down payment. I bring it to my manager before I send it to underwriter. She looks through the whole thing. She pulls one document out and she says, "Hey, it's perfect." And I'm looking at this document like, okay. And she has, the problem is your borrower was 30 days late on her mortgage in the last 2 years. You're done. It's a deal killer. It's over.
Hmm.
You're not getting the loan. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, man, and I remember she pulled out a whiteout bottle and started shaking it. And she's like, and I go, well, what do I do? She's sitting there and I go, what do I do? She said, if I was you, she said, I would. And she it did to me. She said, I would white it out, make a copy of it, stick it back in the file. Underwriting will never catch it.
This is your
This
manager.
is my manager, Gretchen Zayas. I can say that she went to prison. Um, so yeah, so
You're
I
new in the business, and your
it's my
manager
first
says,
loan.
"Here's how we solve this problem."
Yes.
Shakes the white out, hands it to you.
You got a lot of strikes against you. You grew up in an environment where your dad kind of communicates this idea that if you make enough money, you can do whatever the hell you want. And you get into a legit business like the mortgage business, and immediately you're essentially coached into, not that you didn't have a propensity to be willing to bend the rules anyway,
Oh
because
yeah,
clearly you
absolutely.
did. I'm not blaming someone
No,
else,
no,
but
she
all it took was one other person with some questionable ethics to say, here's the whiteout.
and you know what my response to her was like I was like, oh my, that's fraud. Like I could go to prison. And she was like, you're not going to nobody's going to prison. Okay. Worst that happens is if they catch it and they think you were involved in it, she's like, they might fire you. Nobody's calling the FBI. Like she's like, that whole kind of like, get over yourself.
Wow.
Like it's not that big of a deal. And I was like, this chick's closing 6 8 loans a month. She's making 20 grand a month. She's running there's 20 guys in this office. Like she knows what she's doing. She's been around.
Hmm.
So I whited out that 30-day late, made put the copy in the file, sent it to underwriting. Loans back then closed very fast, much
Hmm.
faster than today. So 5 days later, 4 days later, I get an approval, ready to close. It's through underwriting. If it's through underwriting, you're good.
Hmm.
Unless they call and this woman has quit her job or something, which she hadn't. And we close whatever 4 or 5 days later. I get a check for $3,500. A ton of money. I'm behind on my car payment. I'm behind
And
on
what
my.
year is this?
This is 1999 or 2000,
Oh
probably.
yeah.
Let's say late 1999.
Hmm.
And I close that loan, and a week later, we're already working on another loan. I'm already working on 3 or 4 loans, right? Like I'm a
Hmm.
hustler. Like I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm there. I'm the first person in, last person. Uh,
But working 80 hours doing what you want to do and what you're good at,
yeah,
not
right.
filling out
But you're not
forms
getting.
as
I'm not
much.
getting
And
paid.
right,
A lot of
right.
mortgage companies will pay a small stipend
Hmm.
every week or something,
Right.
at least help feed you.
Hmm.
We didn't get any of that, but we did get like 70% of what we brought in. So yeah. So the next guy, his W-2s get there, and I do the calculation, and he didn't make enough money. And so it's like, okay, if he made whatever, $50,000. If he made $57,000 though, he could get that loan. So so I changed a couple of numbers, and I changed his W-2s, and I realized, oh, if you change the W-2s, what do the pay stubs say? Okay, it has to make sense, right? All this has to make
Are you
sense.
still being coached by that same manager at
No,
this
no,
point?
I picked up very, very
You're
quickly,
a quick learner when it comes
very
to these
quickly.
things.
Um, and so yeah, so I changed the documents, and the real issue was what he had made like the year prior.
Hmm.
Had he made a little bit more the year prior, it matched more of what he was making now. Because if you just went off of what he made now, it used to be 2 years, right? So 2 years W-2s plus whatever he's making, and then they do the average, and then whatever that
Hmm.
average is. So I really only have to change a document from a year ago that nobody's going to call on. if they call, they're just asking, does he work there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does work there. So I change that. He barely, it was just a little off. And back then too, listen, it was strict. It was like, you know, well, for that program, I think it was, let's say, 45, and he made 43%. His DTI was 43% instead of 45, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac was like 36, 38, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now it's like in the 50s or something. Like it's out. Like the things that have changed now, like I wouldn't have had to commit fraud. So, I altered that document, and now he barely makes enough, but he does make enough, and that loan closes, and bam, you make 2,500 or 3,500, whatever that fee was. And then, so that went on next person, something. I mean, literally, it was like everybody that walked in the door. I mean, keep in mind, this is a subprime lender. So the
Mm-hmm.
people that are walking in the door, they've been turned down. So, and all night long, I'm calling real estate agents. Um, I'm calling investors who buy and sell houses and flip houses. I'm asking them, can I put a sign in your front yard? And they're impressed by this because they're like, you're not a real estate agent? No, I'm a mortgage broker. You're a mortgage broker and you want to put a sign in my front yard? Yeah, because I don't want people coming to you and saying they can buy their house when they're not qualified. If my sign's in the front yard, they can call me, or you can take their name and you can have me call them and qualify them so they don't waste your time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this one guy, his name was Lee Aker. He was like, I never had anybody do that. I've been doing this 40 years. I never had a broker call me. Yeah, come put a sign in my front yard. Here, I'll send you the list. List? I saw one ad, in the paper. No, Lee Aker's got like 20 houses he's flipping. It's like, I go out, put all these signs up. He starts sending me people. Bam, I got a great guy. Now I'm closing loans left and right. So but they all have issues. But back then, Lee Aker was, he'd been in the business a long time, so he understands that sometimes they don't have their whole down payment. You might have to raise it up a little bit.
Make it work.
It's a gray area.
Mm-hmm.
It's charcoal gray, bro. It's not gray. It's
Mm-hmm.
black and white. It's fraud, But most guys that are flipping houses understand that, and they'll help you tweak the things. And next thing you know, and every time you would suggest it, like, hey, here's what I'm suggesting, and you kind of feel them out. And when they're like, absolutely, I got no problem with that. You're like, you start to realize, like, hey, there's a huge segment of this of the real estate community that is more than willing to hold a fake
Mm-hmm.
second mortgage, or give your borrower their down payment, or this goes on for whatever, 6 months. And I went, like, the first month I was there, I closed 4 loans. Next month, six. Next month, 8, 10, 12. And it just goes. Then they made me a manager. Now I've got a bunch of guys. And then after a few months, that the company got closed down. They had lost their credit line. They were doing some very, very at that point, edgy loans that honestly 3 years later wouldn't have been even a big deal. But by this point, it's 2000. So I immediately go and start my own mortgage company. I started a mortgage company called Consortium Financial Services, and I take a couple of guys with me, and I end up hiring a few other people that never should have been mortgage brokers, but they were good at it. And so there ends up being 10 or 12 guys that are working for me. And we're doing, I don't know, whatever, 3, 4, $5 million a month in mortgages. And this is in an area of Tampa. And this is 20 something years ago. So the same houses that you're spending $350,000 on now, that's a $150,000 house. So if you think, oh, well, $4 or $5 million doesn't sound like a lot of money. Well, back then it was.
Pretty good units.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are for $150,000, you can get a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, brand new, concrete block with a 2-car garage. I mean, these are now they're 350, 400. But yeah, so we start, smashing out or cranking out loans. And you know, I've said this over and over again. Like, I mean, it was at the point where, like, if you had a pulse, we were going to get you a loan.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a bank account. I'll get you a bank. I started my own bank. I go and I make an online bank. I make a website. And keep in mind, this is 2000. The internet is in its infancy.
Infancy.
Mm-hmm.
So if I start bankofybor.com, and you go on there and the website looks right and there's multiple pages and there's a phone number you can call and someone answers it, that's a bank. So I end up making fake bank statements. And what I could do, I've got Word. So you type it all out.
You did it in Word? It wasn't
Oh
like
no,
a.
yeah, I could, no, I could print it out. So I literally, like, I didn't know. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking what, like Excel or something?
Or some special software that a bank might use. You just built it
No,
all.
no, we just like it's really just a template. Keep in mind, if I need you to have your down payment in the bank for 3 months, but these people really don't. They barely got their down payment. So what you do is you write up the contract and say, put your money right now into the title company. So the title company writes you a letter saying, hey, they've got their $7,500. And they say the bank, so you go to the lender and they say, well, where'd that money come from?
Mm-hmm.
You say, oh, that money came from a bank. They had a bank with Bank of Ybor. I can show you where they withdrew it and I can give you the last 3 months bank statements. So you go, okay, there it looks like, okay, they got 20,000 in the bank on average, 21, 21.5, 20. Okay, and here, I just have to change the last few numbers here. They took out $7,500. It charged them $6 for the cashier's check. Okay, there, boom, we're done.
So this is fascinating because your former manager is right. When you whited out 1003 for whatever reason, you're not going to jail. If you got caught for the first one or the second one or the third one, you're going to get fined. You're going to lose your license. You're going to be done in the business. You're not going to jail.
Yeah,
You're just not.
right.
But there's a transition now where you're literally creating a fictitious bank in order to
Mm-hmm.
dock. Now you're talking somewhere mentally you had to go, all right, I'm going from making, I'm polishing turds to get loans approved. Now I'm truly committing fraud.
Right,
Yeah, the slippery
right,
slope seems very
right.
slippery.
What a great misconception. Let me tell you why. Because here's what happened is one, they never like I'm the one getting the phone call. If the phone rings, I'm answering it. My secretary or sorry, my processor is answering it, or somebody there, boom, grab the phone, and we're the one verifying it. They have no way. You realize right away they have no way to verify that this is real or not.
Right.
But here's more to your point. I've been blatantly caught multiple times. So I used to make canceled checks, right? And I would make it looks like a canceled check. Like the front of the check has all the routing number, all the numbers when it goes through
Mm-hmm.
the system, says how much it is, when it went through. You just have to fill out the check. So I make blank checks that say $700 or $900, and you just have to fill it out. And then whatever your borrower's name is, John Smith, and he lives at, 123 River Hills Drive, and you cut that up, and we make a bunch of those, and we paste it onto the upper left-hand corner, and then we make copies. So we've got 24 months worth of them, right? I can verify your 24 months rental history. So I've got the fronts and the backs. We make copies of them, and we send them to the lender. So I had these for SunTrust Bank, South Trust. I got Bank of America. I've got like 4 or 5 different companies that I have canceled checks for. So guys would come in, they say, hey man, I need like a $1,100 canceled checks for the last 24 months. My borrower's been late before, or they lived with their family for 6 months, a year ago, didn't pay anything, or they went from $500 a month to $1,200 a month. Like that's a huge gap. That's going to be an issue. I don't know if it would be an issue now, but it would back then. So what ends up happening is you say, okay, it's just better to it's just better to commit fraud and not and remove any arguing with an underwriter. And so you provide those. Well, I had a mortgage broker who was using the exact same canceled checks for every single person instead of swap and sending them to a company called Pinnacle Bancorp in
Yeah.
Chicago. And Pinnacle caught them. And then they went and they looked through all of this guy's files. And they were like, my God, we got the same checks with different name and address filled out by somebody else different, but it's exactly the same check over and over again. So I get a phone call from the owner of Pinnacle Bancorp, Gary Bond. And he says, hey, he says, Matt, listen. And by this point, keep in mind, I've already gotten a phone call from the account executive. We got a problem. We're like, you got a problem. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, yeah, this is what's happening, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay. Then an hour or two later, I get a phone call from Gary. Hey, what's going on? He says, Matt, listen, we got a problem with one of your brokers. He did this. I'm sure you've heard about this by now, but he did this and this and this. And I said, yeah, a rogue broker. He's like, because you wouldn't know anything about this. I said, absolutely not. I said, I just heard about this, Gary. I am disgusted
Oh my
by his
God.
behavior. And he said, well, I mean, here's the issue, Matt. We've sold $1 million worth of these already 2 months ago. We got another million that's supposed to be a part of this next package that we're selling to Household Bank. Like, what do I say? Well, Gary, if at the end of this call you think I'm cutting you a check for like $1 million, $2 million, I said, I don't have it. We don't have it. So I don't know what you're thinking, but I said that if that's where this is going, that's not. I said that's the non-starter. Like, well, what else have we got? And he goes, well, no, 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 no. I'm not interested. I know that you can't cut me a check for $1 million. Well, I just want to let you know that this is what's going on. You need to get rid of that broker. I said, he's packing his shit right now, bro. And he said, the other thing I want you to know is that if any of these come back on me, I want you like the clawback clause, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
clawback. The clawback used to be like it was 1 year. So it was guaranteed if it was the first month, and it was up to 1 year if they found any fraud. The likelihood they're going to find any fraud at all after even a month or two, is very unlikely.
Especially when they're making the mortgage payment.
Correct.
Yeah.
But even if they are not, like you can't check any of this stuff. You're just calling me. You're
Mm-hmm.
calling one of my phones. You're calling an answering service. I've got all that. It's not like I would set something up and then stop making the payments.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I've got an answering service answering for a management company, multiple employers, a bank, they're going to continue to answer that phone. I just keep paying. So, and you're making enough money, it doesn't matter. It's not like you made $1,000. You're making a chunk of money. This is a mill. So the money's coming in. So if it's $50 a month, I would love to get those voicemail or those answering service where they charge you per minute. So it's like $50 minimum and then so much per minute. Well, we're not getting any calls. So it's just 50 to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he says, yeah, if these things come back on me, you promise that you'll help me get rid of these properties. I said,
Ooh.
absolutely. Of course I will. Of course. And he said, okay. And he sold that to Household Bank. So
Knowing that
this
there
is
was
now,
fraud in the deal.
of course, this is now 2 million. This is the owner of a bank. This is now $2 million that he's admitted he knows has fraud in it. And he sold it.
And
Now,
he
of
could
course,
argue the first bundle he didn't know, but he can't argue that
Yeah, the
anymore.
okay,
second, but he
true.
knows now.
Ethically, though, what should he have done? He should have contacted Household Bank and said,
Yeah.
listen, man, 3 months ago or 2 months ago, we sold you a batch that had about $1 million in fraud.
And sent it to the feds at that point.
Yeah, he didn't do anything. What he actually did was 2 weeks later, he flew down and took me and several of the brokers out for drinks. And when after a few drinks, he said, "Look, I don't give a shit how much fraud goes through through the company. He says, as long as it doesn't come back on me, he could care less."
Oh my
So we're
God.
talking 2002-ish at this point.
This is 2000, 2001 maybe.
Okay.
So I think. Um, so anyway, at this point,
This is clear evidence that the industry was self-regulating
oh,
just fine, and
and
we didn't
that's
need
nothing.
reforms.
You're seeing
No,
this pattern of nobody gets in trouble for anything, and the more you do, the more you make.
right.
So why this
Pretty
is
much
this is consistent with right now,
you
by
can
the way.
behave however you want
Yeah,
as long as everybody's making money,
right.
they'll let you get away with anything.
It's consistent with right now. Like we're seeing so much of this, of just people doing things they know are blatantly wrong, but nobody's getting busted. Everybody's making money, so why would we make a change? And then you roll on another dude, oh, it was that guy, we got it all cleaned up, but nobody checks to see if you got it all cleaned up. It just keeps going.
Right.
So this isn't like, oh, this was a long time ago. This is these patterns we're still
Right.
seeing.
Well, I mean, they're doing no doc loans now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
again,
so yeah,
And they have subprime, but they're calling it something else now. They
yeah,
call them
non-QM.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is so nice, right?
well, we do
Uh,
case studies in every CE class that's taught here. We do
Yeah.
case studies, and you read through the case studies and you think, okay, this would be back like 99, 2000. Nope, they're 2022,
oh
2023. They're current.
yeah.
All the same old.
I get phone calls from guys that get caught, like a loan officer. This was probably a year ago. I got like a panic phone call from a guy. He's like, "Can you come talk to my guys?" He's got like 150, 200 brokers, and I'm like, "Sure." And I went to a conference room. There's maybe 30 or 40 people in there, just to tell my story. And what had happened was one of his brokers had been caught like blatantly committing fraud, and when they went to tell him you got to go, he argued with them. What are you talking about? Like there's fraud. You don't think there's other people committing fraud?
Oh my
And
gosh.
and as they're talking, they realize like he's done many frauds here. And there's other people. He's not telling me who they are, but it's clear that people are committing fraud. And this is the owner of the company. I can promise you, he's super ethical because he was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And he's terrified telling me the story, and I'm just sitting there thinking, and like I'm not shocked at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, you got to talk to them, tell them how you went to prison, how this, how that. I was like, I have no problem with doing that, and I did the whole, went through the whole story and told him and talked to him and explained,
Wow.
just how bad it can get and how you think you're changing a couple of documents and you're not going to end up in prison. Really? I'm not the only person I know that got 25, 26 years in federal prison.
Mm-hmm.
I know a guy that made the mistake of going to trial because he had bought something like 20 houses, all no doc. He says all with like the same broker. The broker's the one who filled out the paperwork. Broker is the one who went no doc. He said, I didn't make any, there was no fraudulent loans. Well, you should have known. How am I supposed to know? I'm just a borrower and I'm making all the payments. I'm renting out the properties. So what's the problem? But then this financial crisis hit. He went under. Tons of people went under. And the feds come in. He could have taken 3 years. He says, I'm not going to go to 3 years. I didn't do anything wrong. He goes to trial. The broker gets up and says, yeah, he knew I was changing this. He knew that. Of course, the broker's going to say that.
Right.
He doesn't want to
Yeah,
go to
yeah.
jail. You can do 10 years or you can cooperate and do 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
Doing 2 or 3. So he cooperates. A couple other people say, yeah, he knew this. He knew this wasn't right. He knew that wasn't right. They find him guilty. The jury doesn't know what you're facing. The jury
Mm-hmm.
thinks he'll get probation. That's what the jury thinks.
White collar
He got
crime.
25 years.
Wow.
He teaches a yoga class at Coleman right now. He's very limber.
So
Very nice guy.
what feedback were you getting from your family as you are creating this successful career in all image? It's a very successful career.
Right.
You're making all this money. Were you getting from family and friends like, wow, this guy's crushing it? Like,
My dad loves me.
wow.
I'm the best bet he's ever made. He thinks I'm amazing. I'm flipping properties. He's like, can I, he knows I'm borrowing money from hard money guys. Now he
Mhm.
wants to lend me money. If I gave, so you're buying this house, if I gave you, you're saying you're buying for 75, right? Yeah, 75. If I give you the 75, like you're borrowing from this guy, he's charging you 3 points plus 12%. What if I give you the money, you just give me a little something back, whatever you think's fair? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's easier, right? Like he didn't have to go out to the property. He didn't care. Cuts me a check for 75,000 and 3 months later, I give him a check back for, you know, 89 or 85,000. He makes $10,000 in 3 months. He's like, dear God, gave him 75. You gave me back 85. Well, when are you going to do this again? Oh, I got another one. I'm buying this. You can do it. Right. Yeah. Let me I'll give you 60,000. I give him, 75,000, 4 months later. Sorry, it took so long, Dad. No, what are you talking about? You're the best bet I've ever made. What, Jesus? Remember when I invested in those orange groves? That never paid anything. I mean, he's like he's got money, but he's investing in ridiculous things like orange groves and buying a piece of land where they're going to put a telecommunication channel thing on, and he makes no money on it. It's a tax, right? The silly thing, they invest in a bar that, breaks even or goes under. Like who invests in a bar
Right.
other than alcoholic? Like these are just ridiculous investments. You give it to me, I put it in some money, we flip it. And are you sure you can sell this? I heard it was in a bad area. Oh, I'm going to get them a loan. Trust me. They're going to get a loan. Dad, they're perfect.
I don't want to psychoanalyze this too much because I'm not qualified, but how did that validation feel at the time? Your dad.
Bro, I felt amazing.
You're finally the son that,
Of course.
ah,
Of course. My sister, who's never done anything wrong in her life and married a lawyer who's super successful, I'm kicking ass. I live right down the street from my parents and them. I barely graduated high school. I got a degree in fine arts. My dad used to tell me that qualifies you to draw sweaty tourists at Busch Gardens. That's the best
oh
you're
my
going to do with
gosh.
that degree.
He
And
didn't
I'll
know you'd be using your art degree to write on the back of checks and make them look
No,
perfect.
right? Like I used that degree.
Yeah,
That was
totally.
the way to go. Um, but yeah, so I'm doing great. Everybody's making money. My brokers love me. I'm dating women that I never should have dated, way out of my league. I'm going on great vacations. I'm kicking ass. I remember my brother when he bought a house, right? My brother got married and had a couple kids right away that he couldn't afford. And he buys a house. He sold his Harley Davidson to get the down payment for an FHA house, right? Buys the house. Like a couple years later, now I'm kicking ass. I bought him a Harley Davidson
Oh
for
my
Christmas.
gosh.
My parents would do that whole thing where it's like, we're gonna pick a name and you can buy for
Oh
one
yeah.
person.
You
Well,
got
I
him and
got
bought
him.
him a Harley.
Yeah. Oh, I went and found like my sister. I said, hey, who did you get Mark? Yeah, I got Mark. We're switching. Boom, boom. Well, I want to get him something. I want to get him something. And I
Oh
got him
my
a
gosh.
T-shirt. I got him a T-shirt and like a Harley Davidson book and like a keychain. And it had a key on it. He's like, oh, thanks. But everybody knows, right? They're all staring at him. He's like, oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks. And they're all looking. They're like, keep looking. And he looks and oh, yeah, the keychain. Yeah. What? Flips it over. Boom. There's a registration.
Oh my
And he's like,
gosh.
no, no. I said, yeah, come on. Look out the front door. Come here. We got to park right in the front door. I remember he jumped on it, started it up, backed it out, pouring rain, and took off in the
Oh
rain.
my gosh.
My mom looked at me. She said, "If he kills himself, I will never forgive you." And I remember thinking, "The fuck are you doing? It is pouring down rain."
Uh-huh.
You could hear him. Wah! I was like, "Oh my God, like this is nuts." He came back like 20 minutes later. Fucking amazing.
So now
Wow.
Great.
you're doing stuff. You're not only becoming the apple of your father's eye. You're successful by any measurement as far as finances are concerned, and now you're able to be generous with your brother. You're able to do things that feel really good to do.
Yeah.
And nobody outside of your small circle knows how this is all happening.
No, no, just, like, I mean, people around me, not my family,
Right.
but people that worked for me knew, obviously,
Yeah.
because they're coming in saying, "Listen, I got an issue."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Listen, if somebody came in and you pulled their credit and they had a 750 credit score, they've been on their job for 5 years, they'd never been late on their payment, they've been making all their bills. Like I'm not even interested in that. I'd call
Mm-hmm.
Susan Bark. I'd be like, "Susan, can you come in here?" I go, "Listen, the real estate agent sent, Lynn sent me this, boom, boom," and she'd go, "Okay, they can go because I'm an FHA approved lender, we're VA approved lender,
Mm-hmm.
subprime, conventional," and I'm like, "Here, you wanna do this?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do it." Nobody's
Because it was
interested.
boring to you.
It was boring, and there's no money in it.
Yeah,
Like this
Right.
person could go anywhere.
Right.
you're
So,
talking back in the day when you're making money on the front and on the back
oh,
on an FHA deal. You're killing it.
killing it. Like, I mean, if you walked in and you'd been turned down you walked in and started the conversation. Well, first of all, when I pull your credit out right now,
Uh-huh.
I know you've been to Bank of America. They said no. I know your real estate agent sent you to me. You went to this other guy. He's had 4 people pull your credit because you could see them all. Like, there's like 6 people
Mm-hmm.
have turned you down, and you walked in here. And then they're like, "Well, I want to get a rate of this." And stop, bro, stop. You're not getting that rate. You're not. No, I don't want to pay a broker fee. You are paying a broker for like
We
you
both know I'm your last
right,
stop,
right.
dude.
Go to your real estate. Go to your credit union. Oh no, you can't. Is that Tampa Bay Credit Union? Yeah, they turned you down. Well, go to Bank of America. That's your bank. Oh no, they turned you down. Like, stop, bro. Like you don't have to buy the house, but if you do, here's my broker fee. And they don't. Back then, you didn't even have to disclose
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
yield spread. They
Right.
don't even know that I jacked up their rate 3 points and they're buying $150,000. I'm getting $4,500 on the back end, and then I'm charging them $3,500 on the front end. And then maybe I'll let them talk me down $500, or maybe I'll waive the
Mm-hmm.
application fee, and they think they're getting a deal, but I'm making
Still
$7,500.
flirting with
Mm-hmm.
10K per loan.
Yeah, nice. And in
Mm-hmm.
Florida, I'm in Tampa, Florida. You making $5,000-6,000 on one loan? You're closing 6 or 7 of them, or if you're closing 4 of them.
You're living like a king.
My
Mm-hmm.
God, I had guys that are pulling up their first day. They're pulling up in like 10-year-old, beat to shit Novas, and then 6 months later, they're driving $100,000 Mercedes, and they're looking at $1.5 million houses,
Wow.
and you're like, I mean, it's. I mean, it was great. It was
Mm-hmm.
great, until it wasn't.
When you so far you're doing common fraud, right? Common fraud being, we're adjusting documentation, we're lying about people's income, that's the stuff that we saw a ton of.
Yeah.
At some point,
Well, at some point, I get in trouble.
so you got in trouble before.
Oh yeah, I've been on probation before.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, I was. So what happened was, by this point, I'd been married and I'm in the middle of a divorce. I bought. I got my wife into about a couple $1,000,000 worth of real estate, right? Like 55, I think it was 54 rental units. So there's a bunch of quadplexes, 10 units, duplexes, like an apartment complex of like 20, and yeah, 20. So she's got a bunch of property, but we're getting divorced. And anyway, one of my so this is I usually don't mention this specifically, but Gretchen Zayas, the manager,
The original manager.
came
Mm-hmm.
to work for me for about 6 months till she saved enough money and went and opened her own company. She opens a company called Creative Mortgage Brokers, something like that. I know.
That should be a red flag.
Yeah, everybody says that. So when I'm doing loans for my wife, in her maiden name, by the way, has to be an arm's length transaction. I'm
Oh
closing
yeah.
them through Gretchen's company. And then sometimes I would buy a house, renovate it, and sell it to my wife. We want to keep it. Or we want our money back. So we can
Mm-hmm.
rent it out, put it back on the market, and sell it. Once it's rented, it's worth more money.
Sure.
So I buy it, renovate it, and I go to sell it. I can't refinance it because of seasoning, right? You had to wait 6 months to a year seasoning, especially subprime had to be over
Yeah.
a year. So what we did was I'd buy the house or buy a quadplex, renovate it, and sell it to Kayla, my ex-wife or wife at the time, in her maiden name, but through Gretchen's company. So, well, here's what happens is that's working fine until Gretchen ends up getting caught in a straw man scam. She'd done a whole bunch of loans for straw men who'd bought houses, pulled money out, never made the first payment, let them go, completely go under. These were guys that were, I believe they all had Italian names.
Hmm.
I don't know if they
Draw
were
your own
mob, I
conclusions.
don't
Yeah.
know, whatever. Seemed nefarious, but there's like four loans, and so once they all go under and the lenders figure it out, they call the FBI. FBI comes to investigate. They grab Gretchen, they raid her office, grab a bunch of files. Well, she didn't really tell me that. I don't even know that that's true. That's what she eventually told me, but I really think they just stopped by and asked her some questions. I remember she came to me and said, "Look, I need like $75,000 to get a lawyer." So I refinance her house and get her 75 grand. And she hands me W-2, fake W-2s, pay stubs, everything. So I, complete, basically you're lying. It's a lie, it's fraud. So she gets the money, she hires an attorney. That attorney says, "You need to bust this guy, the guy that just refinanced your house. Like
You
that's the guy you need
funded
to."
the attorney
I
that
fund
turned
the
on
attorney
you?
that
Oh
told him
my
told me
gosh.
Throw
to
you under the
cooperate,
bus.
right?
Yeah.
So she calls me one day and says, "Hey, look, can we talk?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." But I didn't want her to come by the office because everybody kept saying, when she would call, they'd go 50 on the phone, 50. They used to joke, right?
Yeah.
And so I go and I meet her and her husband at like a restaurant. And I won't, just for the sake of time, I won't get into the whole thing. But the bottom line is, as we're talking, she tells me that the FBI raided her office, took all of her files. I don't know that that's true or not, but so she told me, she said, they have your wife's files. They're asking questions. They contacted my lawyer, wrote a list of questions. I was like, oh my God. Well, you didn't tell them that the W-2s were fake, did you? You didn't tell them the pay stubs were fake. You didn't tell them we were married, did you? We didn't. Well, keep in mind, she's wired.
Did
So
you know she was?
I figured it out because
Yeah.
what happened was I was like, okay, listen, here's what you're gonna do. Tell them that Kayla called you. You never actually met her. Like I immediately come up with a scheme that
Right.
they can say, and then it stops. Kayla's not going to talk to him. I'm not going to talk to him. Your investigation's going to die quickly. And as I'm telling them to say this, they go, "We can't lie to the FBI. Like we can't lie to them." And I went, and this is her husband, Pete. And I went, "What are you talking about, bro? Like, I just refinanced their house." Like, I'm like, "You've been lying to the FBI. Like, I just refinanced your," and he like jumps up because
It's like,
we've
gotta
never
go, gotta
lied to,
go, gotta go.
yeah, we've never lied to the
Oh,
FBI. We may not have
oh,
told them everything, but we've never lied. Now, what
Oh,
I found out
and
later was that the guy behind him was an FBI agent. He's actually in the room with me. And so I realized when he says this, of course, I know immediately, like, who are you talking to? Like,
right.
what you just said, and I know that that's not true. So I immediately thought, oh, he's saying this for the benefit of someone else. And I looked at her and I said, man, I hope you get something for this. And she goes, I don't have to go to prison. She goes, Matt, I'm so sorry. She's like, I have a kid. I'm like, I don't have a kid.
Oh
And
my
I go,
gosh.
tell the FBI agents, tell them not to come to my office. Just tell them to call me and I'll come down and talk to them. So I get up and leave. 20 minutes later, they call me. Guy's name was Scott Gale, special agent Scott Gale. And he says, "Hi, I need you to come down. You know what this is about?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Okay, I'm going to call you back." I said, "Well, I scheduled for like Tuesday or something. This is like a Thursday or something." So the next day, my brother-in-law, who's an attorney, he takes me to see one attorney. Monday, we go see another attorney. I hire that attorney. He calls and says he's not going to be there Tuesday. So I pay that attorney $75,000. So um, he ends up negotiating a 3-year plea agreement, right? What's so funny about that is, I mean, correct, this isn't the um, street code thing to say, but when he grabbed, my lawyer, talked to me, he said, listen, you haven't been indicted. They think you're running a mill, all right? You're churning out millions of dollars every month in bad loans. I'm like, okay. He said, because that's what they're telling them. They don't know that, but here's what he said. If you go and you get a bunch of the 10 of the most egregious files from your mortgage brokers, talk with the FBI, help get them indicted, I can keep you from being indicted. There's no dollar loss on your, like, Now, this didn't happen the first day. This was weeks of talking. Because initially they were saying you lost $500,000. Well, I haven't lost anything, bro.
Right.
Matter of fact, out of the 4 loans you're looking at, 3 of them have already sold, and the other one's going to be sold in a week. There's no, there was a potential loss. There was no potential loss. I'd already renovated the houses when she sold them, and the lender had already done the appraisal. So the lender already agreed they were worth more than she bought them for. What are you talking about? So when he did that and went back, they came back and said, okay, there's no potential loss. There's no loss. And then he was like, listen, there's no loss. Like, you go turn on give them 5 or 6 of your worst brokers, give them 2 or 3 from each one of their files. I can keep you from being indicted. You just go about your business. They'll grab those guys and that's it. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to rat out my brokers. I'm not, like, I don't know what the fuck I was thinking, bro. I should have cut every one of those dudes' throat. Every one of them. Every one of them turned around on me. Yeah, I don't think I guess I think I'm a gangster or something. Like like I'm a tough guy. Like those codes don't apply to me. I didn't sign up for anything. I didn't take any oath. I'm thinking protect these guys because I think we're all friends. We're not friends. We're work friends. You've had work friends. You talk after you lose the job, you talk to them 4 times. Maybe you go to dinner with them and you never talk to them again. They're not your friends. These guys were employees. They were nice to me because they were employees. And when I ultimately got in trouble, they're racing to cooperate against me.
Yeah.
So I say no, I'm not going to do that. Had I known then what I know now, I would have gone we had a weekly meeting. I would have shown up with a weekly meeting with a dolly and loaded up the file cabinets and put them in the back of my truck in front of them and told them, y'all are going to be talking to the FBI soon. You ought to go get a lawyer and just fucking cut all their throats. But I didn't know any better. I was stupid, arrogant. I said, no, fuck that. I'll just take the felony. I'm not going to prison anymore. There's no dollar loss. And I didn't. I ended up getting 3 years probation, but I couldn't run the mortgage company anymore. So I transferred the mortgage company to a buddy of mine, Dave. He had a master's degree in tax. He was not a CPA. So, fire some of these guys that, some of them basically quit or got fired because they didn't like Dave. Anyway, there's a whole thing. We ended up getting a much bigger office, hire even more guys, start the whole process over again. But now I decide I'm gonna start flipping properties.
Wait, so this, by the way, happens all the time. Guys are kicked out of the business. You can
Yep.
no longer be in here. Your license, and now there wasn't licensing as much back then, but your license is now revoked. You can never do it. And we find out the dude's still sitting right there in the office as a trainer or as some other title.
They allowed me to work in the office. They allowed me
Yeah.
to receive a check every month for the business as a consultant for like, I said it was like eight or nine. I mean, it was 9. No, it wasn't 9 because it was about $8,000 a month I made. About 8 grand a month just to
Consulting fee.
This is where regulators go wrong. Like this is where if they were to track that, but what they do is they do the bust. They're like, oh, we did our job. We can write it up as if we have done something, but they don't track to find out if you were still in it, or they could have stopped any further behavior, right? If they were to then like follow the books, watch what's going on, but they still don't do that.
Well, I was on federal probation. And they knew I was working as a consultant. That was the big argument with the government. They were saying, no, he can't be in the business. And my lawyer, of course, was like, what else is this guy going to do? This is the only thing he knows how to do. And essentially, he's basically, there's no dollar loss. He lied on an application. That's what this comes down to. He lied on an application. You're going to say he can never work in the business again he can't even consult. He's run a successful company for 3 or 4 years now. Like, what are you talking about? This is ridiculous.
And he's not originating. He's
And
just
they-
consulting.
Right, he's just consulting, and and when they said, what does that consist of? It was like basically keeping our FHA licensing up, keeping these these are signing up for different lenders, explaining how the different programs work. Like, I'm certainly not going to originate any loans. I'm not talking to any customers. I won't have access to any customer information. And they were like, okay, well, that makes
And
sense.
they never
None of
backed a
that's
truck
true.
up.
Right.
Because you took this deal, they didn't back a truck up to your office, take all the files and go look to see
No.
if it's a mill.
'Cause I told them that wasn't true.
Right.
There's no mill. There's no. None of these guys are doing anything. Are you kidding? They would never. Johnny Moon would never do anything like that.
Oh my God.
It's all none of that's true. Of course, they're all doing fraud. And that's why some of them quit, because now they're scared. Like,
Right.
I know.
you're on
Yeah.
federal
Right.
probation.
Yeah.
I'm going to quit.
If you are watching this podcast and you're in the mortgage industry and you haven't checked out the Knowledge Coop, you definitely need to dive into the Knowledge Coop. In there, you will find content and community that will help you grow as an individual by learning everything there is to know about the mortgage industry. If you think you know everything, just dive in and take some classes, because there's always something more you can learn. To be successful in this business, you've got to continually learn. In addition, if you're a company and you want to teach your people in your own environment, we've got that in the Knowledge Coop Enterprise Services. So reach out to us, check out knowledgecoop.com. Definitely join Coop Plus. Let's get back to the podcast.
You know? So, and that's what's so funny is too, is like they would quit and take all their stuff. And I would think to myself, like, I could have cooperated against you, and you just walked out with 8 files. My files, those aren't your files. I originated those files. I handed you 4 of those files. I ran the ads for those files. I handed you those. And you're going to walk off with what is essentially $20,000, maybe $30,000 worth of fees? And then 4 days later, boom, this guy leaves. Then, you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
happened. It's like, oh, you out of your like,
Well,
fuck.
and you followed the code.
Oh,
You
I
were thinking,
should've.
I'm not turning on anybody. They'll
Should've walked in that
hold
office
on
with
to
a
me
machete.
forever.
Not realizing there isn't one.
No,
Right.
it's just stupidity.
Right.
So anyway, but we move the office, we hire a bunch of new people, and we start cranking out loans again. But at this point, I really don't want to be in the office anymore, right? Like, I want to do something. I'm divorced essentially, and I'm dating a chick from a title company, and I decided I'm going to start flipping properties. So the problem with flipping properties, and back then you could buy properties in Ybor City, it's an area of Tampa.
Where
For like-
Ybor Bank exists.
Yes,
Bank of
exactly,
Ybor.
exactly, on the corner of 7th Avenue and there's a vacant lot. So yeah, so I go to Ybor. You could buy houses, rundown houses, for $50,000. That could appraise if you cleaned them up. If you put 25,000 in them, they would appraise for maybe 100. If you put 50, maybe 150. You couldn't get an appraisal for more than 150. So, and you'd have to dump a ton of money into it. So it's like, okay, you can clean these up for 25 or 30, maybe make 20 grand. But the people that will buy those houses almost can never qualify. The only reason I was able to do this before is because no matter what, you're getting a loan. I'm going to make sure you can get into that property. So now I'm like, God, I mean, I'd still be, if I did that, I'm still committing fraud. Like, this is fucking ridiculous. And then, so I'm going to buy these houses, renovate them. Maybe I sell them. What am I going to make? 20,000? I don't know if you've ever flipped a house, but if you buy a house for 100,000, you put 50 in it and you sell it for 200, you think I'm making 50,000. No, you're not. You're going to spend 50,000 in your head, but I promise you, you maybe make 30. Maybe. It sounds good, but it just doesn't work like that. You can't account for the guy that falls off the roof. You can't account for the 3 air conditioners that get stolen. You can't account for the kids that go and break in the house and throw rocks through the windows or steal the range, or and the worse the area, the worse it happens. You just don't make any money. And then just before the closing, the guy goes on a crack binge and blows his down payment. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, I was like, look, I buy these houses for 50 and I renovate and I sell them. So my first thing is, what I need to do is I can't, 25,000 is not enough money. It's not enough of a spread. So I need to be able to get these things to appraise higher. So I talked to the girl I'm dating, a chick that I never should have been dating. You know what I'm saying? College educated, blonde hair, blue eyed, super smart. I don't know what she was thinking. But she basically says, I said, how can I get these things to appraise at like how can I record them? Because I know how appraisals work, right? So I'm like, how can I get these things to appraise for 200,000? Like, if I could record the sale when I buy it for 50, if I could buy it for 50 and record the sale at 200, I'd create my own comparables. How can I do that? And she went, well, all you have to do is pay the extra doc stamps. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, there's a transaction form for Hillsborough County that we fill out, and we just write down how much doc stamps there are, what the sale was, and pay the extra doc stamps. And when you record it, she's like, they don't ask for the HUD statement, they don't ask for the contract. It's just a form, and we mail in the form, and we mail in the check. That's it. So the next closing I go to, I buy it for 50. I say, give me the form and give me the check. So the check's for I bought it for 50. The check's like $350. I add like $1,050 to it, right? So now I'm paying it's 700, I'm paying $1,400. So I'm paying $1,400. So I changed the 50,000 to 200, and I go and pay. So here's your 350. Here's the extra whatever it comes to. 1150. I think 1150 is not 1,050. 1150. So it comes to $1,400, and I put 200,000. I record it. Boom. 2 weeks later, it shows up saying that the house sold for 200 grand. And now I got something. I just have to buy
On
it
public records.
on public
'Cause-
records.
Yeah.
Public record says this house just sold for 200,000. So what I do is I figure if I buy enough of them in an area, that area will shoot up through the roof, and so I can sell these things for 200,000. But who the hell's going to buy a house for 200 or $250,000 in Ybor City? Nobody. And these guys aren't going to qualify. Like they couldn't afford the payment. So I thought, what I need to do is I need to create my own buyers. That's what I need to do. So I go to Social Security and I make just one call after another to try and figure out how can I get Social Security numbers issued to people that don't exist. And if initially I make a few phone calls and I say hey, my name's John Doe, and I don't say John Doe, I make up a reasonable name, Alan Duncan, and I'm 31 years old and I don't have a Social Security number. They're like, yeah, you've got one. Were you born in a hospital? Yeah, well, you've got one. Oh, okay. Hang up. Well, I was born with a midwife. You got a driver's license? Yeah, you've got a Social Security number. You ever had a bank account? Yeah. Click. Hang up. So you keep calling. And then I thought, who would not? So I'm too old to have. I can't function this long without one. Okay. So I call up and say, hey, I have a kid. He's 5 years old or 4 years old. He's never had a Social Security number. They're like, oh, okay. Well, just take him and bring him downtown or bring him down to our office and, schedule an appointment and we'll come in and. Okay, that's no good. Like I can't drag a kid in
Right.
there.
Right.
That's not going to work. So then I was like, okay, and I called back and I say, hey, same thing, but my son is not in the country. He's with his mother, and they're currently in Brazil. Oh, okay. How old is he? And I was like, oh, he's like whatever, 3. And they're like, oh, that's too bad. Why? Well, because if he was I went through the whole thing too, by the way.
Yeah.
I did the whole, he was born with a midwife, not in a hospital.
Mhm.
I did all that, but he's not here. How do I get the social issued? How old is he? I said, he's like 3. She said, oh, that's too bad. I said, why? She says, well, if he's younger than 12 months old, then we don't have to see him. Oh, well, what do you need then? Well, then we just need the birth certificate and an up-to-date shot record for proof of life. Nice. So I make a birth certificate. I order the paper, I do the whole thing, right? And I order the stamp, the whole thing. And then I order a shot record and I fill out a shot record, go down there, give it to them, tell them I have a kid. And they go, never, no, 10-month-old son, he's never had one? No. Oh, that's so weird. Let me check. You're right. There isn't a Social Security number issued to him. Of course not. I just fucking made all this shit 2 hours ago. I've been sitting in my car in the parking lot, sweating bullets, terrified to come in here for the last hour and a half.
What ID are you using at this point?
Oh no, the first one I did, I used I want to say I used a fake ID that I'd made myself.
Okay.
I'm conflating the timeline
Right.
a little bit, just because we don't want to be here for 6
Yeah.
hours. So I'm using an ID that I made. I was able to make ID, so I could take your ID and I could sand off your information, and I could type whatever I wanted on the ID in reverse on a piece of transparency, and then I could on a piece of laminate, right?
Right.
Transparency, and I would lay it. I would take glue, like a glue stick, lay it over, and then I would squeegee out all the bubbles, and then I'd cut around it, and then I'd buff off the edges and sand it down. And so you could see the Florida hologram through the ID, and it still had your information. Now, I don't think it would pass for a cop,
Right.
but it passed for the chick at Social Security. Let me see. Okay, hold on. Yeah, okay. And this is a real person. This is just some guy. I got his information. Keep in mind, we're renting houses. I've got people are filling out applications. They're
Right.
giving me your Social Security number, your date of birth, everything. I have everything on you. I've got a copy of your driver's license. So anyway, the first one I get issued, boom, I got one.
It's fascinating that you went to school off the Social Security Administration. You'd call in with one scenario. Oh shit, that's not going to work. Call in with a different scenario. You would learn by every engagement
yeah.
with them how to tweak your pitch to come up with a credible age circumstance that would give you the desired result.
Right.
And they basically were complicit in helping you figure that out without,
Yeah,
obviously,
they don't know
unwittingly,
it.
of
They
course.
don't
Yeah.
know it. I
Right.
mean, and let's face it, everybody's like, oh, you can't do it. Well, wait a minute. What if your child was born without a social security number? Because that happens,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And oh, that doesn't, it does happen. It happens all the time. Like what do they got? Amish? They never even get one. They never get a social security. Like there's all kinds of people that just don't get them. And if you're born, out of the country, you have to come back, you have to apply. There's many. Does it happen a lot? No, obviously, it's very rare, but it happens thousands or probably hundreds of times every single month. People are here that don't, and especially children, not an adult, obviously. But
So you're sitting there thinking, I wonder if this is going to work.
well, once I talked to the woman, I was positive it was going to work,
Wow.
And so, and I can't tell you how many times I've gone into places like driver's license bureaus and things don't pan out. You're standing there and they go pull something and they're like, "Oh, this is weird." Like, what do you mean this is? And they're like, "Yeah, it's funny. Social Security says that this Social Security number doesn't match the name." Because initially I'm just randomly making names.
Mm.
And it's like, oh shit. I'm in the DMV. I've did this actually happened. We were in Alabama. This is when I was on the run. We had just randomly thought, hey, what if you just randomly make a number? And went in, made the ID, made everything, went in, fell apart very quickly. Even had the cop on duty come and grab the social security number, which I'd made, and looked at it, and he gave it to the woman. He goes, I wouldn't issue it. So he thinks something's wrong. Eventually, I'm like, hey, listen, man, I got to get going here because if she calls Social Security, she's waiting for them to get a phone call back. And I'm like, look, I didn't think I was going to be here this long. Like, and Becky was there, the chick I took off with. She's like, yeah, we got another appointment. Like, and she's like, can I give you my number? Can you call me when you guys figure this out? And they're like, yeah, give me your number. So she gives them some bullshit number, and we leave. We're like practically running, and the cop hand me. He's holding my. I mean, keep in mind, he walks out of the back. Get John, please. John walks out. And you're like, oh shit, John's a fucking sheriff's deputy. So my point is that initially when I'm doing this is that you don't really know. I felt confident what she had explained, and I'm not walking in. I'm walking in with fake documents, but it's a birth certificate that I made, but it's perfect. It's on security paper. It's got a seal. It looks amazing. I know it looks amazing. I've seen tons of birth certificates. I've been ordering them at this point. So she issues a social security number. Listen, within a week or two, I'm in there getting another one. And another one. There's Social Security Administration like every 10 miles or something. They're all over the place. So I get another one, then I get another one. So it becomes a thing. So now I've got these fake people that I'm making fake people with name, and I'm making the names are like, you've heard this before, like I got one named Lee Black. One guy's name is James Red. I actually had an investor who was named Red. That's the only reason I'm kind of, use. Um, I had a guy named, I have a guy named like David Silver. I have a guy named William Blue. I have a guy named Brandon Green. So we're making these,
Reservoir Dog style.
yeah, the Reservoir Dogs,
Yeah.
right? So we start buying houses in their names. So I'm buying houses as this person, recording the sale at the house at 220, 230, 190, 185, whatever the square footage. Basically, if you said, okay, we're going to do $120 a square foot, then you make them all close to that, right? So it makes sense. There's a formula, obviously. So you come as close to the formula as possible because the formula isn't, it's not a new subdivision. So yeah, so we do that, and we're buying the houses, and now you own 5 houses as James Red, and I have an ID as James Red, and I go in, I open a bank account as James Red, and and I've had those go bad before, but pretty much, once you get it down, you're good. Like you get a couple of bank accounts open, then you keep in mind, I've also, James Red has a social security number that was issued. I get 3 secured credit cards in his name and make the payments. After 6 months, they generate credit scores. So after 6 months, James Red has a 700 plus credit score on average. I mean, he's got like a 690, 705, 710, whatever, roughly 700. So he's about 700. We know he's been on his job 5 years because I can verify that. We know he's got a bank account. I can verify that. Only the truth is I would go in and open a bank account in their names. A lot of times, not always. Every time you do something, it's possibility of going wrong. So it's like you do it as seldom as possible. It's not like I was walking in, acting a fool, like, oh, I got this. I'm terrified pretty much every time. So he's got a bank out. So then what do? Is you refinance the properties. I send somebody out there. They look at the property. Keep in mind, we're ordering 10, 15, 20 appraisals from 1 or 2 different appraisers. So if you say, hey, look, I'm in the middle of renovating this property with this guy, it's gutted inside. It's all cleaned up outside. Can you just throw some pictures of another property in there? And they go, okay. Now, typically they'd
Oh
said
my
no,
gosh.
and it was a little bit of twisting their arm. But once you do 1 or 2, and you're making the payments, and he sees 6 months later, 3 months later, everything seems fine. These things aren't going to foreclosure. The appraiser's fine. He becomes emboldened by it, and he thinks, oh, I'm good. This guy's good. He's always going to be making the payments. So James Red refinances 5 or 6 properties, pulls out, makes roughly gets about $1 million, $1.25 million, whatever, of loans, makes $600,000 or $700,000, makes 4 or 5 payments, and lets those properties go into foreclosure. Now, of course, they do appraise. So keep in mind, if you're, whatever some bank that I'm going through is in California, or they're in, Chicago or in New York, and they get an appraisal and they do a drive-by appraisal, the guy doesn't go into the property, or they do a desktop review. He just looks at the comparable sales. Well, the comparable sales are all there.
Because you created them.
I created them 2 blocks down the street. That house sold for 220. A block the other way, that house sold for 195. Another house sold for 205. This house is going for 200. It's worth it.
What year are we in right now? What's our?
2001.
So we're still way early 2000, way before Fed reform and anything having to do with regulating the
Oh, yeah,
appraisal
yeah.
game. You had a relationship with your appraiser. Appraiser trusted you. You had a
Yeah.
you're
Okay.
sending him a lot of business.
Yeah.
And I have a memory, and I don't know if it's your scenario or if something else I studied, but there was one where the appraiser was taking pictures of the inside of model homes, like new builds. Was that you? Was
No.
that your guy? Okay.
Because these aren't model homes either.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
these are
So-
older. Yeah.
Sketchy
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so these houses have hardwood floors, and
Mhm.
they've got a lot of woodwork and stuff, so you couldn't
Mhm.
pass that off. The
Right.
windows don't look the same.
Right.
Um,
It's amazing how fast your mind does that.
what?
You immediately saw all the problems with doing that.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah. Listen, very quickly I ended up getting the software. Like I ordered the software. I
the
have to,
appraiser software.
yeah, you have to figure out it's a controlled software, right? So you have to
Mhm.
prove that you're the appraiser. You have to send them your license. You have to send them all this stuff. So I do all that. I make the payment. I actually get the software. It's like $1,000. Well, I don't know what. It's probably a couple grand now.
Mhm.
It was like $1,000. At some point, I end up getting the software because you get tired of dealing with the appraiser. I'd rather just have them come out and do the appraisal and say there's deferred maintenance, and then I'll just transcribe or all the stuff that you have in your appraisal and put it on here and get rid of the deferred maintenance, and bam, and use your license, your everything. So I'm now doing everything. And of course, when it comes down to how to contact him, I have a cell phone in his name, and I just change his email address slightly.
Did he wonder why you weren't ordering it? Oh no, because you were still ordering
Still
the appraisals.
ordering, right?
You're just modifying them to make it. Oh my god.
So what ends up happening is these guys, I'm refinancing these houses over and over again. The entire area is shooting up through the roof.
It's the hottest place in Florida at this point.
Yeah, it
There's
actually
so many sales.
Forbes.com said it was Ybor City zip code, the 33605 zip code, was one of the top 20 fastest growing zip codes in the nation in 2002.
Not realizing it was all just you flipping tons of homes
Yeah,
in there.
yeah.
Wow.
So it was so funny when I took off on the run. I had talked to a buddy of mine, and he said, "Bro, all the comps have dried up since you left. Because there's nothing even close to. Because by the time I leave, they're going 250, 300. We're doing multifamilies now for like 350, 400. So now we're really making money. Anyway, we did this. We're making the payments. They're going under. I'm also running up credit cards. I'm getting personal loans. I'm getting another couple $100,000 in that. And then I just stopped paying, and the guy would have like a tragic accident, and I would print up an article. I would take an article from like the Tampa Tribune that said like there was a 12-car pileup or something on I-4, and someone was life flighted, and I would just type it up, and I would put my guy's name in there as being life flighted, and I'd reprint it on newsprint, cut it up, make a copy on the copy machine, and write a letter from my phantom borrower, my synthetic identity's sister, saying, I'm sorry, but my brother, James Red, was in a tragic accident, and you highlight it and you say he was life flighted to Tampa General Hospital, currently in a coma. Doctors say even if he wakes up, he'll never work again. So that's why he's not responding to you. I certainly understand if you need to take the home. He no longer lives there. It's fine.
You're killing fake people.
Yeah, they gotta go. I thought about, well, I'm not really killing them. We didn't kill him. We didn't kill him because we had a discussion where we were saying, let's just say they're dead. Like, let's make a fake, like you're already making fake birth certificates, make
Death
fake
certificate,
death
yeah.
certificates. I was like, I have no fucking idea if these people are going to go to socials. Like, I don't know what they're going to do if they get a death certificate. If he's in a coma, he's still alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing to research.
Oh my
Right.
gosh.
And if you call, like you could call Tampa General Hospital, and I mean, how many places are you going to call? You're not getting anything. It's
Nothing.
over.
Right. And it's just paperwork for them at that point.
Right. And they just want a reason.
Right.
And by the way, if you call his employer, they say, I'm sorry, he no longer works here.
Because you're answering that line.
Right. And then eventually those phones go dead. His cell phone goes dead. Those lines still are good because I have multiple people working at the same place. You know, that employer has just a bad run with guys dying, or not dying, but they're getting into car accidents. It's a tremendous amount
Oh
of
my
turnover. But you know, their cell phones go bad. Like the cell phone, you know, you shut it all, you stop paying, you just reactivate it under the same number. I still have the cell phone. So that happens. And keep in mind, I'm on federal probation. So I got a probation officer that's coming around, like poking his head around every once in a while. That guy. That guy's now a supervisor, by the way. My probation officer came to my house a couple days ago. I just got my last probation visit, by the way. I'm off,
Oh wow.
Oh,
off
wow.
federal probation in
Congratulations.
3 weeks.
Wow.
And she said my supervisor was going to come by with me, but it was his day off. He wanted to meet you. And I went, why? She goes, well, you know him. She goes, and I've only had women probation officers this time. And I went, him? I go, is that the guy that used to be my probation officer? And she goes, mm-hmm. And I go, is he the one that I said, is he sore about me stealing that 11.5 million on his watch? And she's like, yeah, he wanted to talk to you about it. I said,
Oh my
oh, she said,
God.
like, you know, were there warning signs? Like, should he have been looking for stuff? I was like, oh my God, this guy came in one time in my office. I was cutting up W-2s and pay stubs. He walked right up to my desk. Didn't even realize. I stood there with an X-Acto knife in my hand talking to him. Yeah, what's up? How's it going? How you doing? I got a sweaty hand full of an X-Acto knife, terrified. And he keeps glancing down at my desk. And every time he does, I get like this shock through my system. Like, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like, hey man, you know what? I was just leaving. And I'm like trying to get out of the room with him. I got a bank of cell phones on my credenza. He says nothing. They're looking for a crack pipe laying,
Right.
sitting
Yeah.
on your,
Right.
end
Yeah.
table.
Gun
They're
or
not,
yeah.
they're not looking for, he wouldn't know fraud. I mean,
Right.
anyway, nice guy. I'm glad to see it didn't hurt his career. So what ends up happening is eventually, you know, and like I said, I can't get into all we'd be here
Mhm.
forever if I told you about
Mhm.
all the different times that I got called because some lender figured it out
Mm-hmm.
and called up and threatened to call the FBI. And I said, look, let me just pay you back. I'll just pay you back. And I cut him a check for 150,000 or 200,000, whatever it was. You know, and they know they're talking to somebody who doesn't exist. They're talking to me as like, you know, Brandon Green or something, or Lee Black or something, and they know Lee Black doesn't exist, and they're telling me, I know you don't exist. I'm like, hey, let's not get into all that, bro. Let me just issue the fucking check back.
How would I be talking to you on the phone right now if I don't exist?
That's ridiculous. You're just being silly. So yeah, I'm cutting people checks back, but eventually, what happens is I have a buddy who's also helping me do scams in other areas of Florida. And he ends up getting arrested in a bank, right? Like he goes into a bank, he's got a check that's been flagged, a cashier's check that we had refinanced the house, got the cashier's check, the title company figured it out. He goes to deposit in his bank account. They call him and ask him to come in and so they can witness his endorsement of the back of the check. Makes no sense at all. None. I told him not to go. He goes anyway. And he gets arrested. So I get him out on bond. I pay for an attorney. It's an attorney. He doesn't have a federal case. It ends up being a state case because all he really had him on at the moment was using a fake ID to open a bank account, like right. And he'd laundered it was like 300,000 we'd maybe hadn't put in the bank and gotten out. I remember the first bail was like 300,000. I was like, oh shit. And then they dropped it like the next day. By the next morning, boom, it'd been dropped. I didn't realize at the time. Well, that means he's cooperating. Like the part of the cooperation is you gotta let me get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, okay, I'll drop the bond down to $1,000, which anybody can get out. So or I think it was 10 grand. We paid like $1,000, got him out. Hired a state attorney. That was nothing. 20 grand, 15, 20 grand. So anyway, he starts working with a task force is formed, where he explains what's going on. Not hard to figure out. You know, they pull up Hillsborough County tax appraiser's website and they say, hey, this guy Brandon Green, look up this name. Okay, there's 6 houses, 6 foreclosures. Look up this one. David Silver, 5
And all
houses,
the names are
5
linked by
foreclosed.
color. Once they
Right.
figure that
And
out,
they're
they
like,
know
by, I think by the third
yeah.
name, they're like, holy shit. Every time within 6 months, they're in foreclosure. And these are, look at the houses.
Right.
Look at the old picture. Look at the new picture. Look at here's what he's doing. Oh my God. They think they've hit it big.
And whose last name is Chartreuse anyway? That's not even a real name.
So they put together a task force for about 3 months. I'm continuing to do what I do. And one day I have a buddy of mine who's a sheriff's deputy who I'd gotten $1 million, maybe $2 million worth. Between him and his wife, easily $2 million. Bad loans in their lane. No, they're making the payments. Like they're not going. They're just they don't qualify. They're getting their cash back, right? They're walking away with cash at closing. They're not bringing. We're faking their down payments. They're walking away with 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000. They're making the payments. They rent them out. They renovate them, but still, fraudulent loans. And so Steve Sutton, sheriff's deputy, he comes up to me and he says, "Hey Matt, I used to date a chick that works at Tampa Police Department. She's on a task force right now." I was like, "Okay." And he said, "The task force is on you." And he said, "They just handed it to the FBI. They're going to come arrest you." He said, "Do you know somebody in Orlando that got arrested?" And I'm like, "Oh my God.
No,
My best
man.
friend, Travis." But Travis wouldn't say anything. No, I'm just joking. And the thing is with Travis, Travis has a little girl. The mother is gone in the wind, right? She's a drug addict. The daughter has nobody to take. He has nobody. She's going straight into foster care if he goes into prison. Maybe not. Maybe his sister would have probably taken her. She's great. Still, you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you had to lay down your loyalties and say, who am I more loyal to? Like, it's got to be your little girl.
Yeah.
So he cooperates. They come for me. Steve Sutton gives me the heads up, and I pack a bag. I pull 80 grand out of several accounts, combination of accounts. I get some people to cash checks for me. And the girl I was dating shows up one day when I'm packing my bags, like
The one
that
from the
night.
title company?
No.
Okay.
That was short lived. So this chick, her name was Rebecca Hauk. She shows up. I say, "Look, here's what's happening. Here's what's been going on. I'm leaving. The FBI is coming to arrest me. I probably got a couple days." So she begs and pleads to come with me, which is insanity. But she asked to come with me, and what a huge mistake on my part, right? Like, I mean, I knew better, knew it was a stupid decision. But let's face it, picking up your stuff and leaving everybody is terrifying. People say, "Oh, that's not a big deal." It is a big deal. It's a scary thing, and so I didn't have to be alone. So I let her come with me. She comes with me. We go straight to Atlanta. We rent a property in a guy named Michael Shanahan's name. Like, Michael Shanahan is the owner of the property. I create a fake ID name in the name Michael Shanahan. I go down to public records and I satisfy the loan on, he's got a couple loans from Bank of America. I satisfy those loans on his house. So now I'm living in a house as Michael Shanahan. The house's owner's name is Michael Shanahan. The house is worth about $200,000 and there's no mortgage on it. And it looks like I've owned it for 10 years. And if you pull his credit, there's no credit shows up. So there's no mortgage. Now, there is a mortgage. If you pull the real Michael Shanahan, he's still got mortgages. He's still making his payment. He doesn't know. We're making the payments. So we call up 3 hard money lenders. They meet me out there. One shows up at 10, one shows up at 2, one shows up at 4. They look at the house. "Oh, it's worth 200,000. I say, "Oh yeah, well, I need to borrow some money. I want to put a pool in. I'm going to do some renovations, put some hardwood floors, maybe start flipping property, whatever. I owe my parents money for whatever." Give them some bullshit story, and they go, "Well, I could probably lend you about 150,000. So, all right. It's at 12% interest. Well, since I'm never going to make a payment, I'm very acceptant of that 12% interest payment. So we schedule some closings within, whatever, a week or so, different title companies, and we close, and I end up with like 400,000. I think one guy didn't want to give me the whole 150. I think he drops it to like 100 or something like that. I think it ends up being like 400,000 at plus closing costs, points, whatever. So we get like 400,000, deposit that into banks, pull that money out of bank accounts, and then take off. Well, by this point, I've already figured out how to. By this point, I'm surveying homeless people.
Oh, this is the craziest part. This is the piece. Listening to one of your
I
podcasts. This is
listen. I love this guy.
the.
Usually somebody gives me this. I get that some kind of a look, and I have to be like, "Don't judge me." You know what I'm saying? Like I get that. But I can see it in him. We're kindred spirits, bro. You need to watch
I should
yourself.
watch him. You're saying,
Yes.
all right.
So, I'd started surveying homeless people because the problem is getting birth certificates. I'm sorry, getting social security numbers issued. They're only 6 months, a year old. Like, like I actually can get it. You actually can get an ID in those names, but I was never able to get a driver's licenses for some reason. You could go into the DMV and get an ID, but when they said it was a driver's license, they cross-check it with something because they would come back and go, "Ooh, oh, this is weird. That's not what you want to hear."
You look old for being 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so then they don't have the date. They basically just says that this social security number has recently been issued.
Mm-hmm.
And that's odd.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that happen when I would go open up bank accounts,
Mhm.
but I would always have like a W-2 that was 5 or 6 years old. Because their questions always, are you sure this is yours? And I give them the real one. They go, "Have you always used this?" They go, "It says it's been issued within the last 2 years." And I go, "Really?" I go, you know what? Hold on. I got a W-2 from 5 years ago. I've been using this forever. And they go, "That is weird."
Wow.
Oh, well, keep on
Wow.
going. So, but they don't do that at the DMV. The DMV, they go, "Let me make a phone call." And they grab your shit and they walk off.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're sitting there like, you can't leave. They've got my stuff. If I leave, there's definitely going to be an investigation. I have to sit there and wait.
Play
Even
it
if
out. You got to play it out.
Yeah. So, but what I figured out was if I surveyed homeless people that had never had a driver's license in those states, then I could order their real birth certificate, their real social security card, their real high school transcripts, a certified copy of their driving record. I could register to vote in their name. I could get a credit card in their name, and I can walk into the DMV and say, "Just moved here. Somehow I lost my license in the move." And they go, "Okay, well, what do you have? We need your one primary." I go, "Oh, I looked at the website, my birth certificate." And they go, "That's one. We need 2 secondaries." And here's my social security card. "Oh, wait, here's my bank statement." They go, "No, no, no, that's no good. I want them to see that because I want them to see it went to the address and I want them to see the name.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a bank account, even though it's a secure credit card." Right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know that. It looks like a bank statement. They're not going through it. "Oh, no, 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 that's not going to work." And you go, "Oh, well," they go, "Do you have your lease?" I'm like, oh, I do have my lease." Sometimes I give them a lease. Sometimes I'd say, I have my high school transcripts. And they go, "Oh, we can use those." "Oh, you can?" Like I don't fucking know exactly what you need. I could walk in and go, boom, 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 we're good. Put me on the list, but I have to act all, "Ooh, golly gee whiz."
Mm-hmm.
So they go, "Oh, yeah, yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Here, you're number 42. Oh, okay. You go sit down." 30 minutes later, number 42, I walk up, I give them my information, they punch it in the computer, they go, "Stand over there next to they stand on the yellow line, you stand on the yellow line, you take a picture." And
You're in
they,
business.
and yeah, 5 minutes later, they print out a little, a drive, well, it depends on what state.
Yeah.
In Alabama, they print you out a piece of paper and they mail it to you. And, in Nashville, they give it to you right there. In Tennessee and Florida, they give it to you right then. Back then, I don't know what they do now.
Mm-hmm.
Some states they mail it to you. Some states it's just a temp. But yeah, you get it right then and you walk off. And now I got a driver's license. And this guy who lives under a bridge 6 states away who has no clue, and I can go immediately and I get a couple secure credit cards in his name. And if I really want, I go and I prepare a birth certificate and I get another social security number issued in his name, and I get driver's license. I get credit cards in that name, and then I get a car loan in that name. I open bank accounts in that name. Now I don't even have anything that's attached to this guy. And if you want to go a step further, I actually one time went and had a guy's name legally changed from stop.
I'm amazed.
Michael Eckert. His name was Michael Eckert. I changed it from Michael Eckert to Michael Johnson. Like you can't come up with like a more Smith would have just been
Right.
it would have been just a slap in the face, right? So Michael Johnson, and went to a lawyer, paid him $1,500, and just I wanted to see what the process was. And then I go back and I get the driver's license reissued to Michael Johnson, get the social security number issued to Michael Johnson, and this guy hasn't got a prayer of figuring this out.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, he's going to die under a bridge way before I'm going to die. So I'm buying vehicles, I'm renting properties, I'm opening bank accounts, I'm doing everything in these names. And these guys, they don't have a prayer. I'm getting I'm getting pulled over and I'm getting tickets in their name. I'm driving a car in that guy's name that's his car. It's financed, 100, full coverage insurance, and I'm getting pulled over and getting tickets. I got
Wow.
so many tickets as Michael Johnson. I had to actually go to driving school as him. I was going to lose his license. I'm driving like a maniac. So, um, yeah. So this goes on. So
Rebecca's still with you at the time.
Becky's still with me. She's a
Okay.
nightmare. Yeah.
You were breaking traffic laws?
This isn't. I had no idea.
It's unprecedented.
Yeah.
So what happens is, I get the 400,000 out, dump it in a bunch of bank accounts. We remove it in cash. We take off. We go to Charlotte. Then I go, so I'm living in Charlotte, downtown Charlotte, and I run a scam. I go get a fake. I get a guy named Gary Sullivan. I get his information in Vegas.
And this is a great one, by the way. But you're wearing a Salvation Army jacket for this.
No, just a badge.
Just you have a badge.
Yeah, I make a Salvation Army badge with my wanted poster, picture on it. And so it says,
Your wanted poster picture.
yeah, I have a wanted. By this point, the by this point, the FBI is looking for me. So I'm on their wanted list, which is like 500 people. It's not, the Secret Service. I'm number one on the Secret Service because I'm a big deal for the Secret Service. They're not looking for terrorists. So I'm number one on the Secret Service's wanted list, and the U.S. Marshals are looking at me because I absconded from probation.
You're on the run. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I survey a guy. I'm surveying people all the time, but I end up getting this guy, Gary Sullivan, and I get an ID in his name, and I buy a couple houses in Columbus, South Carolina. Columbus or Columbia?
Columbia.
Columbia, thank
yeah.
you.
Where my brother lives.
Columbia. So
What's his name?
yeah.
Don't
So
tell him.
I buy a couple houses. I get the owners to owner finance me the houses. I put down like 20, 25 grand. And then they hold a mortgage, right? So, but they're wraparound mortgages because they have mortgages already. So I wait about 2 weeks, and then I go downtown and I satisfy their wraparound mortgages and their primary mortgages that they had. And now I own those houses for nothing, right? Like I have no mortgages on the houses. And in actuality, I actually recorded a second mortgage on there for a fake mortgage company that I created. Because when you borrow money, if you say, "Hey, I want to get $200,000 out," like they don't want to give. Fannie Mae sometimes will be like, "Look, we don't want to. We're not giving you 200 grand. We'll give you 100." So if I already have a mortgage on there for 180, and the house is worth 225, then they're like, "Okay, we'll give you 180 plus the cost or whatever." So they cut a check to the mortgage company. Well, I am the mortgage
Which
company.
you created.
So it doesn't look as funky where it's like
Right.
he pulling out 200 grand. No.
Right.
So I did that on some of them, and I refinance them, and I pull out like I got like 1.3 million in mortgages, and so things are good. And then one day I go in the bank, and I had applied to refinance in multiple banks, and there was a Fifth Third Bank. So Fifth Third Bank, the woman, the loan officer, I fill out everything. She says, "Oh, I'll put in the paperwork. I'll do it." She goes on vacation like the next day for like a week. So they're like a week and change behind. So by the time I borrowed all this money, she calls me and says, "Oh, we're ready to close. We can close." I'm like, no, no, because I don't want them to send an actuary down,
Oh, yeah.
right? Because they might see something, and that's what happens is they do see something. I cancel the loan. I don't want the loan. She goes, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, hey, don't send anybody down there. I don't want to get charged with an actuary fee." She goes, "Oh, no, it's not. It's the cost of doing business. No big deal." I said, No, I don't want anybody to go out of their way. She's like, "Oh, it's fine. She's down there all the time." Okay, I don't know what to do. So one day I go in the bank to remove some money from Wachovia, and a couple deputies walk up behind me. They put handcuffs on me, and they pull me into the manager's office, and you
get cuffed in the bank,
Mhm.
and
Front
are
of
you
everybody.
thinking it's over?
I did but they kept saying Mr. Sullivan,
Okay.
and so I'm thinking, well, maybe they don't know. Like
Right.
they must not know. Like what I do know is that like I'm on the Secret Service's most wanted list. I know these are because by this point there's 20 or 30 articles that have come out, right? Like there's a bunch of articles. And the Chicago Tribune had just started running an article called what was it called? The Fugitive. So I mean I know it's bad, right? And we've been on local TV and stuff, But once again, this is only 2000. 2004. So
And this is when I had seen you, was back then, because
must it's out.
yeah.
But I've also had multiple plastic surgeries. Like I'd had two hair transplants, a nose job, facelift, teeth were done, you know. So I feel like I look fairly different. Not extremely different, but the Secret Service there were instances where people had recognized me that were doing closings, like a lawyer had recognized me, and he actually went and looked at my wanted poster in the back room. He had like an office room, whatever, staff room, and they looked at it, and he was like, "Hey, guy looks similar, but this guy is out of Florida, and this guy's wanted out of Atlanta, and this guy's been on his job for 5 years, and it's not the same guy." Comes back, lets me sign, and I walk out with a check for 200 grand. So, people would recognize me, but it never quite fit.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the detective shows up to question me, and he questions me in the bank. And when he shows up and starts calling me Gary Sullivan, I realize he's not an FBI agent, which is who I thought was coming. He's just a local detective. So over the course of the next 20 minutes, he gets the head of Wachovia's fraud department on the phone, and I convince him that I haven't done anything wrong, that I came in and borrowed a first mortgage. They'd only found, out of like 5 or 6 mortgages, they'd only seen 3. They only discovered 3 because the other mortgages are still being mailed in. They would mail them in back then. You've got a window. They call it the gap period. So they'd only picked up 3. So he's like, "Hey, he borrowed 3 first mortgages," and I'm like, "That's not true. It was a first mortgage, second mortgage, and a home equity line of credit." "Yeah, that's a lie. That's not true." This guy's going nuts, and he's absolutely on point. But my scenario makes sense to a novice, and the detective's a novice. And I said, "What makes more sense? That I came in here and applied for a first mortgage. I wanted to get about $500,000 on my house. The woman said, I can get you a first mortgage. I have a friend that can get you a second." And when I went to her, she said, "Listen, if you need more money, I can get you a HELOC." And I said, "Yeah." And so she sent me to that chick. I said, "Now, to her friend." Now, I said, "The bank may have done something wrong, but I didn't. I assure you." I said, "What makes more sense? That a bunch of loan officers working together to make loan fees?" I said, "Or a guy that works at a labor company." And I pull out I have a card that says I work for a labor company. I said, "Is just defrauded 3 major banks out of $500,000. And so he ends up saying, "Yeah, I think you guys have a problem at the bank. I don't think this guy's done anything." So
Wow.
he flips out. He starts screaming. He goes, "Look at his ID. His ID starts with 000. It's fake ID." And he says, "I just ran this guy through NCIC. This is Gary Sullivan." He said, "Okay." He said, "And that is a South Carolina ID. Our IDs start with 000. And they do. I realized I had gotten it issued from South Carolina. So I lean in and I go, "Oh, wait, now I'm not Gary Sullivan." I go, "Bro, what are we doing here?" He's like, "I know, Gary, I know." And this guy's going nuts. And he's like, he even tells him at one point, he said, "Listen, you need to lower your voice. Okay? I don't even know what to charge this guy with. All right? He's been nothing but cooperative." This guy sounds like a lunatic. Like, what's his name? The guy from Wells Fargo sounds like he's insane. Like he's screaming. And so he says, "Look, I'm going to have him follow me back to the police station, fill out a police report, and I'm going to talk to the district attorney and see what we can do." So what do? I follow him back to the police department. We go inside.
And your brain's got to be racing at this
I'm
point, like,
terrified.
right?
But and listen, even that
Because
on
if
the
they print you, your
right,
prints are on file.
right. Now here's the thing. I remember Steve Sutton, my buddy Steve Sutton, the sheriff's deputy,
Mm-hmm.
had told me once that NCIC, or I'm sorry, APHIS, the APHIS system charges.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "So we only run prints if identity theft is believed to be identity theft, or if the person has no documents." I have an ID issued by the state of South Carolina. I have a social security card. I have 4 different
incredible.
I have 4 different credit cards. One of them's issued by Wachovia.
Oh my
I
God.
got multiple bank accounts. I have houses in my name. Never one time did anybody really think, other than that guy, it's a fake ID. And he quashed that.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I ran him. He has no warrants. So when I go and I go in there and I fill out the police report, and he has me wait for him in the hallway. He has to talk to his lieutenant. He ends up talking to the lieutenant and the district attorney. And he comes back and he's like, so this is, you heard me say this before, right? Like where my wanted poster was on the wall in the hallway. There's a bunch of wanted posters, like 40, 50 of, I don't know if there's
You
20.
saw it?
Oh, I saw it. It was the only one in color. It's the only one in color. Everything else is black and white.
Oh my
And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at these wanted posters. You know, there's a guy, bike thief, car thief, home invasion, burglary, murder suspect, bank fraud. Fuck. I look over and I'm like, holy shit. I turn around. Walks right up behind me as I'm turning around. He's like, hey, Gary, you ready to go? I'm like, yeah, what's up? We walk out, get in the elevator, go downstairs, walk to my car. And he says, hey, listen, he said, I talked to the district attorney. She's got some questions. He's like, I mean, there's some issues. Like, we're not really sure yet what's happening, but don't leave town. I go, come on, bro. Where am I going to go? I own 2 houses here. I'm not going anywhere. I haven't done anything wrong. I promise you that. And he goes, okay. He was like, I'm sure that's right. And he gives me my stuff, and I get in the car and drive, go to 2 more banks, pull out more money, jump on the interstate, and take off. I go to Houston, get into a huge argument because by this point, Becky has moved to Houston because we're going to get we were going to get a couple $1,000,000, then we were relocating. So I'm in the middle of the scam when this happened. So we only got like 700,000, 6 or 700,000. So I leave 700,000 in the bank, and I go to Houston. She's relocated. I packed up all my stuff first in Charlotte, got in a big truck, drive all the way to Houston, get into an argument with her, had unloaded the entire truck into a storage, everything, including all my fake IDs, everything I have. I have accordions full of IDs of people that I've ordered, ready to go stuff. It's all in the storage unit. We get into a huge argument. I take 100. She gives me 100,000. I leave with 500,000 or 600,000 in cash, and then I leave. I get into my U-Haul, drive all the way back to Charlotte to get my car, and I get my car in the parking lot at downtown Charlotte at the apartment complex that we lived in. Drive down this big parking garage, right? Drive kind of catty corner to the parking place, or to the apartment complex, and I go inside and I get a coffee because I'm thinking I'm leaving. I'm starting over with nothing. I got like 100 grand, and every time I say that, it sounds stupid, I know, but 100 grand for a guy on the run is nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm blowing through money, like I'm not pinching pennies.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm driving a car that I know is wanted by now. By now they've this has been 4 or 5 days now. I know they've put it together, and so I'm concerned. Like I got my car, I know they're looking for it. I'm driving around with a driver's license that I know probably has a bolo out, right? So I go in, I get coffee, and while I'm in there, I see 2 people from the apartment complex, and they're like having a frantic conversation when they see me. And so the female, there's a man and woman. Well, the woman goes out the back, and this is right downtown, so she's just right out the back. And then they call the guy's order. He comes out with a little tray of coffee. And then I go up and I get my order. But he doesn't leave. He's just staring at me. And I mean, we're 10 feet apart. And and I'm like, I'm trying not to look. But I'm also like this is like, you almost have to say something, right? Like some guys,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be, it's like, but I don't want to say anything. I don't know what, really, you know what I thought it was? It's like the 5th. It's the 4th or the 5th. Our rent's due on the 1st. By the 3rd, it's late. I thought, I haven't paid because I've been gone for 4 or 5 days. Why am I not going to pay $2,000 rent when I'm leaving? I'm abandoning the place. And it's not in my name anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't say anything. I get my coffee. I walk outside. He follows me. I get into my car. I start my car. I play with it. Remember CDs? I had a CD. They had the big block of CDs.
Oh, the
going
changer.
Yeah, I'm going through this, switching through them, getting my music, right, because it's going to be a long drive. And I have my seatbelt on. I check for traffic, and he starts screaming, "He's right here! He's right here!" And I look up, and I look behind me, and there's 2 guys running towards the back of my car. So I just punch it, and wham, I zoom off. And like, it sounds dramatic. Like they probably weren't that close. Like but I'm honestly, in another 10 seconds or 20 seconds, they probably would have been in my car. And even in my car, like I'm not the guy that's going to run somebody over. Like if they stood in front of my car, I'm not going to run you over. But like, oh, you got me. Like I'm not going to hurt anybody. But they weren't, and I'd already checked. Sounds dramatic though, right? Like, I like to picture me fishtailing
Oh yeah,
sideways down
totally.
but it had that
Somebody
posi-
with groceries get thrown in the air.
yeah,
like,
but it had that posi traction thing, and none of that was possible at that point. So it really just shot off, and there was no traffic. So I just bolted, and I went straight down the street about a mile, and I stopped at a homeless facility, and immediately jumped out immediately. Boom! There was 3 white guys. Jump out. Boom. Hey, my name's John so and so, and I'm here. I'm taking surveys for the Salvation Army.
What?
We're trying to determine where we place our next homeless facility, and I survey those guys. One of those guys' name was Marion Joseph Carter Jr. And so I drive all the way to Nashville, Tennessee.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah, this is an important clarifying point.
You're ripping out of there. You're being followed. Some people would say, "I'm never doing anything bad again. I'm
I'm
gonna go
already
get
on the
straight."
run.
And you're
for a while now.
Oh, I've been on the run like a year and a half at this point.